Minimal contact in stadiums shouldn't stop the usual suspects from going down.
Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
Champions League evening ahead. Mbappe, Di Maria and Neymar all start this evening for PSG, as do Ander Herrera and Idrissa Gueye, amongst others. As for Manchester United, it's not a defence that they would go with in an ideal world. No Harry Maguire, no Eric Bailly. So Wan-Bissaka right back. They have Chuanzebe, they have Lindelof and they have Shaw as a back three, with Telles as left wing back. So back five ultimately, Telles and Wan-Bissaka, the wing backs, with Shaw, Lindelof and Chuanzebe across the middle. Then it's Bruno Fernandes captain, Scott McTominay and Fred, with Rashford and Martial, sort of that split striker combo that Solskjaer likes away from home from time to time. So that is Manchester United in Paris this evening. Philippe Auclair with us. Philippe, you're looking forward to the football tonight?
Yes, I'm excited. I'm looking forward to it, very much so.
I was reading today, there is talk once again of a European Super League monstrosity type thing. 5 Premier League clubs, including Manchester United and Liverpool, have been approached. There is financial backing to the tune of $6 billion. I would presume for PSG, this is the dream. They cannot wait to ditch League On and get rid of it, no?
I wouldn't put it quite in those terms. They're certainly part of the group of clubs who have been talking, by the way, for a long time about this. I think the first time I heard this mentioned, this project of a Super League mentioned on the record by anybody, was by Karl-Heinz Rummenigge at Bayern Munich some 10 years ago on the trip I did to Munich. And it was already something that was up in the air. And it's actually the story which came out today, I think, made a lot of noise because of where it came out. And I suppose the timing as well, so close on the heels of Project Big Picture. And you get the feeling that for the big players in European football, in a way, the pandemic is an ideal landscape in which to assert their new ambitions, which are not so new. It's something that's been on the table, as I said, for a very long time. Clubs have been talking to each other, clubs from the ECA. I mean, the big guys, really the big guys, the ones you would expect to be in this Super League of 16 or 18 clubs, whichever shape it takes or doesn't take in the future. They've been talking about it for a very long time. But there are some leaders, and it's true that Liverpool and Manchester United are some of those leaders. It's true that Real Madrid, Atletico and Barcelona are involved, and it's also true that PSG, it's certainly not a train that would leave the station without Nasser Al-Khelaifi making sure it's got a first-class compartment in it.
It certainly seems like there's more smoke than ever and more noise about this than ever. Would you imagine that this will be those clubs turning their back entirely on the domestic leagues?
No, I think that would be almost impossible, and you've got to see that in the light of the calendars and the fact that, in fact, you've got the way that the rights are being sold. Because what we're talking about here is people call that TV rights, but it's not just TV. It's basically any kind of platform, digital platform rights, broadcasting rights in the widest possible sense. So when you've got one block of these rights coming to an end, and you've got to organize a new batch, so to speak, for the next 3, 4, 5 years period and so forth, which you need to do to organize the competition. They're already positioning for that, for the next batch, basically, which is why you might have seen that we're talking about starting it in 2022. This is not purely by chance. It's because it is an opening there. But it's also a bargaining chip. I think you have to see this not just as a grand scheme, which probably it is for at least some of those clubs, but also as a bargaining chip in the fight, in the negotiations they're having with UEFA, and also in the broader scope of the conflict. And that's a real conflict between UEFA and FIFA, because as you will have seen, FIFA is actually quite keen on those proposals, because that would enable them to hamstring UEFA. And if Gianni Infantino can hamstring Ceferin, he will do it. And there's money, a lot of money to be made there. So, yes, I mean, it's not exactly edifying as a site. And for us football fans, we're totally taken out of the picture. But I wouldn't take what has been coming out today and actually the last couple of days in other countries, in Spain in particular, as being something that is totally new. I think what is new is the impetus that it's gained And the fact that all these stories are leaking at the same time, guys. I mean, this can't be by chance that you suddenly have got Project Big Picture and then this coming out literally on the heels of it. There is something afoot. It's an opportunity. Every crisis is an opportunity. And the bigger you are, the bigger the opportunity is.
Now, before we get to matters at hand in Paris this evening, Arsene Wenger has released his autobiography. He is a man whose career you have followed very, very closely. You've read the autobiography. What's the verdict?
I'll be absolutely honest. I'm a little bit, I feel a little bit hungry. It feels like the petit four have been passed around the table, but I'm still, or rather than around the room, but I'm still waiting to sit at the table and to have the plat de résistance or pièce de résistance. I think, in a way, the fact that Arsene obviously wrote this book by himself, obviously with the help of an editor, but he wanted to write this book himself, means that there is an awful lot there that is left unsaid, and particularly the things that Arsene think would be quite, could create conflict or could create problems because he hates it. And he's also a very secret and secretive kind of person who does. It's totally out of character for him, for example, to have done all the media work he's done, over the past week or so, 2 weeks. It's totally unlike him to do that. He really had to force himself to do this. And the book, I think, suffers a bit from that. There are still some really interesting insights, and how could there not be when it's somebody like Arsene Wenger talking about his fantastic and unusual career. But I think, for example, people would be surprised not to see anything about José Mourinho in the biography. As somebody coming from France, I would be very surprised not to see almost anything about Marseille and the incredible rivalry he had when he was at Monaco with Bernard Tapie, and which was a really complex story, which he doesn't go into. And there is a certain reluctance, I think, from Arsene to go into these more in these touchier areas, so to speak, more problematic areas. And the book, I think, is still a fascinating book, but suffers a little bit for it. And I'm actually wondering if it wouldn't be better. Some friends of mine, rather than reading the book, are listening to it. And I'm wondering if it's not a better idea to listen to him telling the story, even if when you read it, you can hear his voice and his funny accent. But I'm a little bit underwhelmed, if I'm absolutely honest with you.
Well, based on what was serialised in the Sunday Times over the last couple of weeks, I'm not surprised to hear that. It was very vague, very low on detail. I mean, about the most interesting takeaway is, one, that he hates losing. I mean, he really hates losing. And two, that he was obsessed with the game. I mean, it's hardly breaking news. You wonder then, what was the motivation? Surely not financial.
Well, yes, partly financial.
Is Arsene Wenger not set up for life multiple times over, no?
Oh, he's been set up for life for a very, very long time, which doesn't mean that Arsene doesn't want a little bit more. And
okay. I guess another few quid never hurt, did they?
Well, obviously not, because he didn't do that for free. But I think that, yes, the motivations, I think there was I've talked to Arsene. I'm not actually breaking a secret when I say that. I've talked to Arsene a number of times about this over the years. And I've asked him, why don't you write a book? Why don't you write it with me, for example, or with somebody else who has been with you for a very long time? And he was always saying, well, no. There's enough in every season that I've passed at Arsenal to write a book about, which is true. Every season would deserve, like not a chapter, but like a whole book. But I think there is a reluctance again to put things out. And I've tried to find a word in English to put across that idea, and I can't really quite find it. It's not reserve. We call it pudeur in French. It's a reluctance to put oneself in the spotlight and to reveal things which you believe are private. And Arsene for that is a master, because he's a wonderful communicator. I think for me, he's one of the greatest communicators I've seen working a room, for example, including some pretty hostile Arsenal FC AGMs in which he had furious small shareholders having a go at them, and within 45 seconds they were in his pockets. So, but unfortunately, I think he probably needed to be spurred on a little bit more. And also you have to keep in mind the fact that he now occupies a position which makes it impossible for him not to be diplomatic. You cannot work as one of the senior people at FIFA in charge of the game and the actual game without, exercising some caution in what you put out in the public domain.
It must have been very difficult for him at times in his managerial career, given what you said about how much he dislikes conflict and being the centre of attention, to have found himself in the midst of Ferguson's ire and then Mourinho. And you think of times like where he's standing up on top of the dugout at Old Trafford with his arms spread wide, and it's like this comical front page picture. That must have been quite taxing for him based on what you've just said.
Yes, I think so, though. In the heat of the confrontation, I think that there is an incredibly competitive streak to him. And when I say that he's somebody who is not necessarily the keener to put himself across as a private person in the public domain, he's also somebody who thrives on competition. He's also somebody who is not afraid of speaking his mind out. Is also somebody who has used that as a spur in the past. I think when he was a football manager, he used that. He was quite good at using the media, actually very, very good at using the media. But he knew where to stop. He knew up to which point he could go too far, to quote Jean Cocteau, but he never went past that point. He was always in charge of everything, always in control. Even though there were moments, honestly, you could feel he was seething and he was dying to say something out, but he wouldn't say it because he knew the consequences, he knew the impact it would have. But he just used it to his advantage, basically, as another weapon in his armory. I nearly said in his arsenal, but that would be too easy.
We're talking with Philippe Auclair. So to matters at hand, Philippe, Group H has Manchester United in a difficult spot, really, with Leipzig and PSG, the semi-finalists and finalists of last season, and also the extraordinary backdrop in Paris, where there's month-long curfews now in place from 9 p.m. to 6 a.m. So it's PSG, Manchester United. This is tricky for United, this group.
Yes, it is. Very tricky for this United in particular. Obviously, PSG are... they're not favourites. If they don't win this group, there's something really seriously wrong at the club. And there's something wrong at the club, but that's seriously wrong. I don't think that's the case. And even an understrength PSG as it is tonight, with so many players missing. I was drawing my list. It's incredible. Leandro Paredes, Juan Bernat, which means that, Bacca, who is not the best, will be at left back, and Thilo Kehrer, Mauro Icardi, Marco Verratti, who is such an important player for them. Some people would say has been the most consistent player for a number of seasons ever since Carlo Ancelotti took him from Italy. It's a very tough one. It's a very tough one for them, and you wonder how they're going to cope. I'm talking about Manchester United when they're confronted by this level of attacking talent. I have to say I wouldn't say I fear the worst, because that the worst for whom, but I do think they're going to be in serious trouble if this PSG team is anything like it's been in the recent past. They've had a tough start to the season, and actually very typically tumultuous start to the season. You probably heard what Leonardo had to say about Thomas Tuchel, for example. It was quite extraordinary. I don't think there is any other big club in Europe where you would have your sports director saying of his manager, well, if he doesn't like it, why doesn't he leave? On the record, with all the cameras looking at him, and the radio guys with their microphones. And that's what he says. And you think in any other club, that's a crisis. No, PSG, that's normal. That's just the way it goes. It's crazy. But on the other hand, look at the team he can put up even with all these injured players. So yeah, it's going to be a tough one for Manchester United. I genuinely don't take, their win at Newcastle being an indicator that they're suddenly much, much better. They're a team, they've got serious problems.
They sure do, not least in defence this evening. What had Tuchel said to draw that response from Leonardo?
He was complaining about the lack of recruits in the summer market. They did move late, very, very late. I don't necessarily think that the players that they moved for were the players that Tuchel had in mind. But there has been something in the background which has been simmering for quite a long time. These two men, obviously, I don't think they will ever spend their holidays together. They're very, very different types of personalities. They're very strong-minded. They've got strong ideas about their own prerogatives and a sense of hierarchy. And perhaps their sense of hierarchy is not quite the same whether you called Leonardo or Thomas. And therefore, it's almost impossible for them not to clash at some point. And remember, Thomas Tuchel, by the way, the way he left Borussia Dortmund, that was not exactly in peaceful terms. He was at war with his board. He is that kind of manager. And but maybe it's the way it has to be at PSG, which is a very strange, dysfunctional club, which is incredibly rich, has got this incredible squad of players, wins everything inside in France, and then is always found wanting when it comes to Europe, and also has got, some proper, systemic problems within. So maybe it's one way of making it work. You have to have an opposition between the sports director and the manager for PSG to go forward.
You can regard reaching a Champions League final as success or failure very, very easily. Tuchel's standing on the back of reaching the final?
I think everybody's aware of the special circumstances which led to PSG being in the final. Nobody's forgotten the Atalanta game, for example. So I don't think his credit has gone up that much because of that, even though he reached the final. I know that sounds completely crazy, but that's the level of expectation. And also, I think he was, in a way, a victim of the draw. When people learned, which half of the draw you were for this very strange and very exciting Champions League final phase, people thought, well, if they don't go to the final, it's worse than a failure. It's worse than a failure. So it was the absolute minimum that people were expecting from him. And to be fair, why should it be the case, where you've spent that amount of money, and when you have a front three of Angel Di Maria, Kylian Mbappe, and Neymar? I think you could expect this team to do rather well. Yeah. They have got, I think, the strongest squad of any club in Europe. And if everybody's fit, I was amazed when I was looking at the list of players who were injured, and I was looking at the team they were going to put on tonight. I'm thinking, well, actually, they're not that much. Apart from Verratti, obviously, they're not that much weaker than they would have been with, if they had been at full strength. That's how strong they are.
One last point to put to you. Martial back in the French squad of late. It was more Pogba, though, I wanted to get your thoughts on for a moment. Herrera was talking in advance of this match and saying Pogba can win the Ballon d'Or. There's nobody else like him. Post-restart, he has not been himself, certainly in a Manchester United jersey. And who knows, the guy had COVID not so long ago. Who knows what situation he's dealing with or what his energy levels are. When he's back with France in the international squad, does he pick up his disciplined role that we saw in the World Cup?
Oh yes,
he does.
Oh yes,
okay.
Oh yes. I don't know if you've seen the Griezmann goal in the last game.
No. Didn't see it.
My goodness, look at that.
I saw Griezmann complaining about not playing in the right position in Barcelona as a consequence. I didn't see the goal.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look at the pass from Paul Pogba for Luca Digne. It's an absolutely beautiful goal, which is almost complete. It's unlike anything you would expect from a Deschamps team. It's like really imaginative, but the quality of his passing is just. Only Pogba sees passes and can execute them like that. It's just. With France, nobody's complaining about him.
Right.
And he's got, he's got competition. There's a young chap called Camavinga. I probably have annoyed you with him last year. And before, who plays for Rennes, whom I think can become one of, he can become a fixture of the French team for the next 15, 20 years. That's how good he is at 16. And Pogba is, has to find a place in, he's not any young. It's amazing. Pogba is a bit one of those players because there are so many questions asked of him season after season. People don't see him age. If you see what I mean, he's a bit like it's kind of a Dorian Gray of football.
Yeah, we're waiting for him to mature.
A bit like Theo Walcott, but a different dimension.
He's going to be 30
He's a world champion.
Yeah.
Sorry? Yeah, well, absolutely. He's not started his decline. He's entered his maturity. He's now at the top physically. And with so much in the game, depending on your physical ability these days and speed and especially the speed, you have got 5-6 years in which, you can be at your absolute top. And he's in those years already. Now, we're not seeing it with his club, but we're seeing it a bit, at least, with the national teams. Now, draw your own conclusions. And I'm not saying Didier Deschamps is the greatest manager on the planet.
Okay. Philippe Auclair, always a pleasure. Thanks so much. Enjoy the football tonight.
I hope I do.
Football on Off the Ball.
With Paddy Power.
New normal, same old football. Paddy Power.
Gamble responsibly. Gamblingcare.ie.
This week on Screen Time, Kristen Scott Thomas insults me.
Love is blind, as you know.
Much to my delight.
Exactly.
Armie Hammer lies to me and Lily James.
You read it eventually.
Yeah, totally.
Lily, why don't we do a quick pop quiz with them?
And Oscar winner Mark Rylance ruins my image of the Oscars.
I'm afraid it was like all these things. It wasn't what it's cracked up to be.
We also try and make some room to talk about movies.
Screen Time with John Fardy.
Listen and subscribe to the podcast now on newstalk.com or on the Newstalk app.
At Audi, we know different people have different milestones. Whether it's your firstborn, saying I do, celebrating a birthday,
Happy birthday!
or even buying